There were no good games this year. How many times have you heard that recently? Along with, gaming is boring now, gaming is bad now, I wish games are fun again, are we in a gaming crash? All of these different things say something different, but functionally it's the same thing. In some way or form, people are disappointed with games, right? And the response to this will usually fall into two big camps, I guess. One of them will be the "you are unfathomably based, everything you say is true, gaming was more fun in insert year, probably when they were kids." We'll talk about this. And then the other camp of people will be saying, well, we have Elden Ring, we have Baldur's Gate, we have Zelda, we have Spider-Man, and then there'll be like a smaller group of people saying, yeah, we have all those big games, but look at the indie sphere, right? There's Deep Rock Galactic, Lethal Company, Manor Lords, Vampire Survivors, Risk of Rain, Valheim, the list goes on. There's an infinite number of very revolutionary indie games. The question sort of pops up is, if there are so many good games that people agree are very, very good games, why does this opinion keep popping up? And the way I look at it is that I think it is equal parts there being truth to this. And I do think a lot of the stuff we are seeing in the industry now, a lot of the stuff I'll talk about right now as well, is true. There are practices that are actually harming the games we consume, the way they're made. A lot of these things are rooted in fact. But I think an equal part of this is rooted purely in perception. And I feel like that is very clear with the likes of all these indie games that I just mentioned, right? Everyone agrees that they're very, very good games, but we keep saying there are no good games this year. So what does that even mean? And I think a lot of that is a purely perception issue that has actually a lot to do, I feel like, with monetization as well, which we'll get to in a second. I guess before I talk about all of this, particularly with like monetization, how games are made, yada yada, I might be 22, but I'm a gaming boomer. My favorite game growing up was Diablo 1. That's the first game I ever played. Shouldn't have played it when I was that young. The Butcher literally showed up in my nightmares. I think I spent like 3 months trying to beat level 2. So that was fun. But yes, then I discovered World of Warcraft, and here I am. So I've played a lot of very, very old games, a lot of new games, but I'm not in the camp of I play every AAA release that comes out, right? I'm just not. I don't fall into that camp at all. So I've probably missed a lot of the more egregious examples of bad monetization, yada yada, just to establish a baseline of what we're talking about. And I guess, naturally, that leads me on to the first big point that, you know, we can't just jump over. Monetization, exclusivity, business practices. All of these three things I want to lump into one big thing. So, most recently, Helldivers. I am in Latvia, part of the EU. I use the euro. All of our laws are European. I cannot buy the game, I cannot play the game, and it's done, basically. Why? I don't know why. Business practices and exclusivity, basically. And that's what I mean. There is a very, very good game on the market right now. A lot of people are enjoying it, but for some arbitrary reason, it's probably licensing, probably Sony being lazy and not figuring out, like, I don't know, localized things, even though, again, it doesn't make sense since we're all European. But whatever the case, there's a game that I literally can't play. And this goes for almost every single console exclusive. This is what really bothers me about these console wars, is that they're fundamentally anti-consumer. Exclusivity is designed to get you into this walled garden and then just make money off of you being in that walled garden. This is a bad thing that no one should defend in any way, shape, or form. And this is happening with PlayStation, this is happening with Nintendo to a lesser extent. We're seeing this more and more, basically. Actually, I don't want to say more and more because I feel like Xbox is going in the right direction with this because, you know, they own Windows. But a lot of these things are true because there are games that you can't play. Can't access for whatever reason. I want to play all of these PlayStation exclusives. I'm not buying a $500 brick. I have plenty of bricks. I don't need more bricks. And in a similar vein, there's the monetization of those games, right? So back in the good old days, you bought a game and that was the game. It was great. Nowadays, you buy the game, you figure out that even in the single-player game, there is, like, I don't know, $80 worth of DLC. I feel like here, it is important to distinguish between these arbitrary things that don't actually affect the game, which is sort of the perception angle I want to talk about, and actually very rooted in reality things that fundamentally destroy the game. So let's start with the latter, because I feel like in the MMO sphere, where I'm very familiar with World of Warcraft, this is fundamentally parasitic to the game. So a lot of the skins, which in a game like Counter-Strike does nothing, right? You see a skin, it literally means nothing. In a game like World of Warcraft, that is a RPG about progressing your gear, progressing the way you look, progressing your collections, this is parasitic to the game. The thing with the MMO sphere is like everything that is behind World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, RuneScape, probably a few other bigger MMOs, every single game is pay to win. So this entire genre has been destroyed by purely monetization structures. Why would you play an RPG where you can just swipe to win? I guess gacha games exist, but you know, I feel like MMO gamers don't really play MMOs for that reason. In this case, there is like no debate in my mind that monetization is making gaming worse. And I feel like that is mostly, you know, I keep saying World of Warcraft is the best thing and the worst thing to have ever happened to the MMO genre. And that remains true, even up to today. But at the same time, I feel like for how much we talk about these monetization structures, a lot of this is sort of based in perception. A lot of these skins really do nothing. Accessing the game early really does nothing. A lot of these things feel really, really bad, but in a way, it's just price discrimination, right? Like with the early access to the game thing, I feel like that is the perfect example of what I mean. I don't think it's going away, by the way. I think it's here to stay. I don't think it's going to get longer than 3 days. That's sort of my gut reaction right now. Maybe it's going to go up to like 5 or 7. But I don't think it's going to be like super early access or anything, because I feel like that would destroy value. The point I'm getting at, though, is that I feel like this accessing the game early thing is targeting consumers that are not you and me talking about games on a YouTube video. I feel like it's targeting a segment of consumers that they like buy one game every month, and they see this game they're interested in. They don't know anything about game discourse on YouTube, so why wouldn't they pay a little bit of extra to get the game they want to play a little bit earlier, right? And I feel like that part of the consumers alone will keep this business practice afloat, because it's a win-win-win, basically. They lose nothing by releasing the game a couple of days early and making more money off of it. Like, they're going to release it anyway, it's probably going to be bugged, and there's going to be a day one patch. Nothing changes for them. And that's what I mean. Those 3 days later, it really changes nothing. The only thing it does, it price discriminates people who want to pay more, who are impatient. If you're patient, it changes nothing. Like I said, I'm not someone who buys AAA games the day they come out, with the exception of, like, I don't know, Elden Ring or something. But, you know, so that's one of those things that is more so, I feel like, a perception issue. I don't want to normalize it, but at the same time, I'm doing everything I can not to normalize it, so, you know, I can admit that it really changes nothing for me, but I don't support it either, right? And the same goes for a lot of these skins in single-player games particularly. It changes nothing to your experience. Like, for me, anything that is in a store that I can buy, it means nothing because I didn't work for it. Like, I literally made money at my job, and then I paid for virtual pixels. It's not very rewarding. Like I said, in an MMO, it is a bit different. In a single-player RPG, I really don't care. At the same time, I do think it's bad. It's artificially locking content behind a paywall. If it's just skins, it's better. If it's missions and stuff like that, it obviously goes more and more into this murky territory. But point being that I think a lot of this is very true. Monetization structures are harming the games. But a lot of this, as much as I also talk about it a lot, I feel like is overblown. And that's sort of, I feel like, something we're seeing more and more, especially with the $70 upping the price, right? Obviously, I don't want to spend more money. Of course I don't. But at the same time, if you look at game prices, they've been extremely sticky. And by every stretch of the imagination, it doesn't make sense that they're still the same price. So them going up makes sense. And in a way, a lot of the monetization structures that we're seeing now is a result of them not going up. So it is this very murky space where a lot of it is just bad, but a lot of it is sort of overblown, and therefore I feel like a lot of these conversations are sort of muddied by just, you know, you're painting with a very broad brush, I guess, and just saying all monetization is bad, whereas in reality, I feel like a lot of games would benefit from having, like, a subscription model with MMOs again. Like, a subscription model, I feel like, is actually the fairest way to monetize an MMO, regardless of how ridiculous that sounds. Like, a subscription price for a single game nowadays is unheard of, but in this paradoxical way, I would actually feel like it is the most fair model. So, long story short, yes, I definitely think monetization is getting worse, essentially across the board, but I don't think that is what's actually making games worse. I think what's making games worse is a long laundry list of things, which we'll talk about in a second as well. But I definitely don't think it's getting it 3 days early. Like I said, it's a price discrimination tactic. It has been going on for decades, basically in every part of business. It's a downward sloping function designed to capture as much surplus as possible. And by you making this purchase to get it 3 days early is effectively signaling that you perceive more value in the same exact product, right? I'm not on the function. I'll never be on the function. And that's how I sort of fight back against this practice, even though I don't think it's going away anytime soon. But I don't think that those 3 days later, you getting the game and playing through it yourself, I don't think the game is worse because of that. I really, really don't. And connected to this sort of perception issue, I guess, is two, content creators. And I don't mean this in the sense of making videos talking about these things, I mean something completely different. And shout out to Connor and Trash Taste for talking about this, because bro actually won the worst take of the year with saying this.
Another Connor take, which is there were no good games this year.
This is Connor's take of 2024 is... There were no good games this year. No!
And the thing is, a lot of people say this, and that's sort of what got me thinking about this video in the first place. Why is it that even people in the gaming sphere, especially like streamers who play a lot of games, also say this? And I've come to a few different conclusions. Number one, mono gamers. What I mean by that is there are people just waiting for the next big thing. They're playing effectively one game. Most commonly, this is like League of Legends, this is Counter-Strike, this is World of Warcraft, these games that have been around for decades and probably will be around for decades more, right? So for these people, the only thing that will be the good game is the thing that kills their previous game. There's a very good reason why when Valorant came out, there was a lot of hubbub about it killing Counter-Strike, and every single MMO is the WoW killer, and so on, right? So I feel like for those people, it is a completely different discussion that has nothing to actually do with the rest of the industry and everything to do with the small sliver of like the genre they're actually enjoying. On the other hand, though, we have the streamer example, and again, Connor. And the reason I bring him up specifically is it sort of got me thinking about what makes a good game for a streamer. And I think the simple answer to that is that a lot of games are just not good content games. You know, a lot of these super introspective story-based games, they're not going to make a very good stream. So a lot of the stream games that have popped off recently is stuff like Among Us, stuff like Lethal Company. A lot of these things are fundamentally social, right? It's sort of a coincidence that both of those, I guess, are indie titles. I guess the next closest thing in this, it's not even AAA either, but you get the idea. Helldivers, right? A lot of these games are good games, but at their core, they're social experiences that makes them a very, very good stream game. So I feel like from that perspective, especially with streamers, less so with YouTubers, this sentiment of there being no good games is more so based around their job, you know? And I sort of feel this same exact thing also happening with TV shows, with anime on my main channel, right? A lot of the things coming out now are binge releases, which sort of means there is no social interaction from these things, and more importantly for the YouTube side, there is no weeks-long content, right? Like back in the day when Game of Thrones was airing, when Lost was airing, when The Walking Dead was airing, a lot of people talked about these series every single week, and that's what was the best show for YouTubers, right? Now though, a lot of these shows come out with 10 episodes at the same time, and for a YouTuber, that is very, very bad, because they're not going to be able to talk about this for weeks and weeks. And that's sort of the conclusion I've come to with a lot of content creators specifically, is that this take is, I don't think it's meant to be malicious in any way. I really, really don't. I think it's literally just a case of them not really being able to experience these games on stream, because I do think a lot of content creators really enjoy playing these games on stream specifically and not by themselves. It's at least what I hear a lot. A lot of people just don't play games off stream at all, basically. So that's sort of the conclusion I've come to on that front, which is, again, purely perception, right? Like, absolutely none of that has anything to do with the games actually coming out, and everything to do with the material that streamers can really latch onto. And I feel like in the AAA genre, AAA games, we haven't really seen a lot of that since GTA 5, I guess. Like, the RP sphere there is like the only real thing that has lasted for a long time. Outside of that, I don't think we've seen like a big thing that every streamer can latch onto, and it is this next big thing. And that sort of, again, goes back to all the MMO talk, right? The next big thing, just hoping for the thing everyone can latch onto, and it's going to be this huge thing that everyone can agree on. Which very nicely leads me onto number 3, and this is, again, purely a perception issue. Back in the day, when we talk about the good old gaming days, when everyone was talking about World of Warcraft, when everyone was talking about, I don't know, Minecraft, all of these games, these were cultural phenomena, right? And again, I want to liken this to my main channel as well. Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones came out in the 2010s, that area, right? Ditto for Breaking Bad, The Walking Dead. These things were these big events for the simple reason of there not being more shows, more games. And that's genuinely what I feel like it is. On YouTube, if you look at YouTube in the Minecraft days, Minecraft YouTube was like a majority of the gaming sphere, basically, right? Whereas now, there are so many small bubbles of games that it feels like there is no that next big thing, because all of us exist in these small little bubbles of these small games that we all enjoy. I think something that actually illustrates that is budgets, right? Back in the day when we heard Game of Thrones is going to have a $100 million budget, everyone lost their minds because that was unheard of. Now, that's not a big deal at all. There are just more big things. It's hard to quantify because all of us have found these little bubbles we exist in, and unfortunately that also means that like the community itself is sort of fractured, right? And I feel like in a way, we share this common hobby, I guess, but there really isn't that big touchstone for all of us, right? And this is almost like a societal angle in a way, because I feel like this is true for basically everything. Because in the early days of the internet, it was this thing that truly brought everyone together, because there was this thing that connects everyone, but there was relatively little space in this thing that connects everyone, so everyone was sort of in the same room, if you will, right? But now it has grown and grown and grown, and in a way that is very good, but at the same time we've sort of lost those links. In the MMO sphere, we're all waiting for the next big MMO. In the shooter sphere, everyone's waiting for the thing that, I don't know, is going to kill Call of Duty. I don't know what's going on with shooters. But you get the idea. There is not that big thing that everyone latches onto. Even Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate is a absolute anomaly. But a lot of people just don't play games like that. Simple as that. So there isn't that shared experience. Back in the day, I feel like if a game like Baldur's Gate came out, even if you aren't like a RPG enjoyer, you would still play it because that is just the best thing possible, right? I feel like that's kind of a reason why Minecraft popped off. It was this first big sandbox you could really do anything in. I think that's why World of Warcraft popped off, because it was truly the next-gen MMO at the time. It took everything that sort of worked before in other games and combined them into this readily accessible, beautiful package. And even though there are small things of MMOs that have been done better in other games, no single game has managed to capture that spark that WoW had. And in a way, I think this has nothing to do with games and everything to do with, I don't want to say society because it feels like very funny, but I genuinely do think that it is technology, it's society, and the way we view the gaming hobby as a whole. While it is sort of sad that I don't think we're going to have another one of these things until we have a major technological breakthrough. I don't. Either that's going to be like VR or something to do with AI. I genuinely don't, because I think all of us exist in, like I said, these small little bubbles of specific genres we enjoy, specific games we enjoy. I just can't see anything coming out on the scale of World of Warcraft. So it is kind of sad, but at the same time, basically every niche is being served. And that's why I call this a perception issue, because truly, that is a good thing. The fact that we don't have this single thing that is just the best thing on the market, that's good, because that means there is a lot of competition, a lot of creativity in completely different fields that has nothing to do with just working on this magnum opus of the industry, right? Sort of goes together with a lot of what we talked about before, with the content creator angle, with all that. And it is a purely perception issue in my eyes. And I guess in a somewhat similar vein, but also not really similar vein, let's talk about AAA games briefly. I feel like everyone's talked about this to death. I think AAA games as they stand now, they're unsustainable. They're fundamentally flawed in basically everything they do. They're not creative. A lot of the stuff they're doing is kind of the same thing that's been done over and over, and they're just trying to, like, I don't know, up graphics. There's this obsession with, I don't know, upping graphics to photorealistic levels. Personally, I'd rather have like 1,000 enemies on screen rather than 10 ultra-realistic ones. That's just me, though. I think we hit that plateau a long time ago, but it's these things that they keep pushing that I feel like people don't really care about. But that's beside the point. The point I was getting at is that I feel like the AAA games we see nowadays, they're creating something beautiful, but in a tiny niche. They're not pushing the envelope at all. And I'm gonna be likening everything to MMOs, I guess, but, you know, like I said, you know what happens to WoW gamers. I feel like, in a way, AAA gaming currently is in the WoW clone era. And what I mean by that is that there hasn't been true innovation in the AAA genre for a long time. The only thing they're doing is they're trying to make the same deeply immersive story-based experience with like RPG elements. And that summarizes like 90% of AAA games. And that is slightly sad. I think AA games will take over. I think indie games will take over. And I think in the same way that the MMO genre kind of has collapsed in a way, I think the same thing is going to happen to AAA games. And again, it's a very murky situation, because while I do think the AAA games as they are right now, they're not necessarily getting worse. I just don't think they're getting better. In the same way that the stuff they're pushing has plateaued, I think the design philosophy of how they're approaching these games has also plateaued. They're just pouring more and more money into things that, frankly, a lot of people don't really care about when it comes to games. They're not taking risks. A lot of the stuff they're doing is extremely safe. Occasionally, we do have a game that sort of pushes boundaries, but it's very, very rare, right? Like we have Elden Ring, for example. That's like a magnum opus of the Souls genre. Like, the most ridiculous statement about all of this is that a lot of these AAA games, they're extremely successful in terms of how many copies they've sold, but they're not successful because they haven't even made back their money. And that is unsustainable to me. Like, I feel like the only way forward is to make smaller games that can fail, basically. You know, like right now, I feel like they're unironically too big to succeed. Not to fail, to succeed. Which is a weird thing to say, but here we are. But I guess on the flip side, like, the very, very good thing about this is that while these AAA games are inflating in scope and in size, that is mostly down to technology. And the beautiful thing about technology is that eventually everyone has access to it. And what I think is going to essentially happen is that, like I said, we've already plateaued in terms of graphics. I personally think there is no point in going higher. I see no point in 8K displays, stuff like that. Maybe this is going to age like milk in the same way that all the people saying 144 hertz monitors are, like, you can't see the difference, even though you clearly can, right? But anyway, I think we've plateaued in graphics. I think we've plateaued in like systems depth. I think we've plateaued in all of these things in the AAA sphere. That's going to trickle down to smaller developers with readily accessible tools. Everyone can use the Unreal Engine. Everyone. And the Unreal Engine is in that plateau area of basically being photorealistic, right? So what I think is effectively going to happen is a lot of smaller game companies are going to pop up, and those are the things that will experiment. They're going to look like AAA games, but they're not going to be beholden to all the troubles that hit a AAA game with these things of, we need to make a massive 200-hour experience that is frankly copy-pasted things, because, like, we are focusing on the smallest of details that don't really matter, and then, like, we ran out of time, so we have to copy-paste this all across the map because we're going to be increasing prices, and it's just bad across the board, right? Smaller developers can use the tools that will trickle down to them eventually and create truly innovative experiences that will blow up the market. And we've seen this time and time and time again, especially recently. Every single game that has popped off in recent memory, outside of, like, I guess Hogwarts Legacies, has been an indie game. Like, truly. Maybe this is my warped perspective, but, like, Starfield was supposed to be the next generation-defining Skyrim-like game. That flopped. A lot of these other games have also not really done particularly well. Like I said, a lot of them haven't even recouped cost. I'm sure they're great games, but it's not like they're really pushing the envelope forward in any meaningful way. And I think that is the beautiful thing about the sort of era of gaming we're about to head into. What I think is going to happen, and this is probably going to be a wild prediction, is I think GTA 6 will be effectively the last big AAA game to truly push the boundaries of what you can do with modern game design. And I think every single game that comes out after that will be sort of outdated by the time it even comes out. And what I mean by that is that I feel like technology nowadays is coming out so fast. With AI, graphics engines, everything is advancing so fast. 8-year dev cycles are just not possible. Like, 8 years from today, can you imagine a game coming out 8 years from today? It's not as it would have been in 2016. Personally, I don't think so. So what I think is going to happen is smaller developers will use the tools that are coming out rapidly, and instead of creating these massive 300-hour RPGs, they're going to create these small gameplay loops that truly shift boundaries in how we think about games. Something like Lethal Company, again, I feel like is a very good example. It is a tiny game. Lethal Company is a tiny game, and people play it for hundreds and hundreds of hours. Risk of Rain, comparatively small game. You're playing through the same maps. I have like 300 hours on it. Games even like Slay the Spire, a deck builder, right? People play that for thousands of hours. These small games with a extremely tight gameplay loop that is going to take advantage of the technologies that come out for the foreseeable future, right? I feel like the Unreal Engine, every single update that comes out, people lose their minds. Whenever we see people take advantage of those, I think that's when we're really going to see like the next era of gaming. I think this is going to be a bit of a cyclical thing. I think eventually AAA games will realize that, you know, they need to make smaller projects, and I think we're going to basically see the same thing, like I said, that happened with the MMOs. If we want to take this MMO analogy even further, I feel like what has happened with MMOs is that the market collapsed. After everyone tried to do World of Warcraft and failed, the market collapsed, and basically what would have been MMOs became smaller genres. In a way, I think Genshin Impact, for example, it's a gacha game with a lot of MMO elements. So I think that is like a small subgenre that immediately comes to mind that I think is a result of the gold rush that was MMOs. And I think the same thing is going to happen with AAA games. There will still be people wanting these deep, immersive experiences. There will still be people craving these massive projects with like 300 hours worth of collectibles all across the place. But it's not going to be all of these things at once. It's not going to be 300 voice actors, 5,000 animators, 20,000 people teams with, I don't know, 15 layers of developers, yada yada. Diablo 4, you know, you can't open a stash tab. I don't think we're going to see that for a long time. I think these things will become much more concentrated, and then once technology once again wraps up, like the sort of, again, these massive scope creep games are going to come out. The point that I'm getting at is I think we have plateaued with AAA games, and I think that's where AA games and indie games are going to really come into play. But to wrap all of this up, the final point I feel like I must raise is a lot of these conversations are, you're just no longer a kid. A lot of the games I played when I was growing up, they were bad games. I enjoyed them because I was a kid, and I could spend a lot of time thinking about games. Even World of Warcraft. Back in the day, WoW was like the only game I thought about. It was magical. Now, WoW is kind of... And it's, I don't want to use WoW because I feel like WoW is sort of a game that has like a mixed reputation, right? So let's just insert any nostalgia game in here for the sake of arguments. A lot of these games are still the same games, you know? Like Diablo 1. I started that with the, let's go full cyclical. Diablo 1. It's an incredible game, but I just don't have the opportunity to play Diablo 1 anymore that much. And the simple reason for that is that I am no longer a kid, and I can no longer truly experience these games. When a new game comes out, my thought isn't, I'll take a sick day, I'll fake sick, and I'll stay home and play the game for the entire day. It's not, I need to plan around my schedule of how I'm going to fit in the game. And I think that is an undeniable reality with a lot of these things. Especially when it comes to like all the monetization practices that I feel like a lot of us were sort of blind to in the early days of the internet. Looking back, the whole DLC train, I feel like begun much sooner than a lot of people realize. Obviously, it was the horse that started it all. But between the horse and where we are today, a lot of stuff flew under the radar and people bought. People were happy to get. So, you know, I feel like a lot of that is also purely changed in terms of us growing up and sort of seeing the cruelty of the world, you know? But I guess to wrap all of this up, there are definitely problems with the AAA industry particularly, but I think saying gaming is bad now is not true. Just not true across the board. And I don't think that is true for AAA games, even if they are few and farther between, which, again, is sort of a double-edged sword, because the reason why every game back in the day, every AAA game was very good, is because there weren't a lot of AAA games. So, you know, it was sort of the inverse of survivorship bias, I guess. You know, where every single game that actually got developed was supposed to be very good. Now, everyone has access to these tools, and everyone can pump out these AAA games that, you know, are not very good, I guess. But, you know, sometimes we get the Elden Rings, sometimes we get the Baldur's Gates, and it's very good. And at the same time, because these tools are accessible to everyone, we are seeing smaller developers truly test new ideas. The battlegrounds, battle royale genre, that started as a small mod to a game. Look at it now. Fortnite, one of the biggest games ever created. you know? And that's what I mean. I feel like every single genre that's going to pop up basically from today to whenever, I don't know, we upload our brains to the internet, will mostly come from small indie projects. And I think that is the double-edged sword of sort of these massive games. They are too big to succeed, truly. They can create something beautiful in a small niche, like I said, but they're never going to really push the boundaries as they did when no one had computers to do these things. Think of small indie games as effectively hackathons going 24/7 at this point. Every single small indie dev can make a small game and become the top seller on Steam. There is a literal financial incentive to truly push boundaries where that doesn't exist with AAA devs, because they, by design, because the game is so big, they need to play it safe. I keep going in circles. My thesis statement here is that a lot of the reason why I think people say there are no good games coming out, a lot of the games are disappointing, is in many ways a perception issue. This comes from both the time we spend on the internet, as well as things that we sort of think are bad, especially when it comes to money, but they're not really bad. They don't affect the majority of people. And there is, again, region locking. There are genres that have been harmed by this, but in broad strokes, I don't think it's that big of a deal. And at the same time, we do have these incredible games. So I don't think games are getting worse. I think games are getting infinitely better. And I think a lot of the focus on games getting worse is for people who are only looking at the AAA sphere. Genuinely, if you look at the top-selling games on Steam right now, there are so many good games there that you could play. A lot of games are coming out basically every single day that are absolute bangers in the indie sphere. And that's where I would look for truly good games that are coming out all the time. I don't think it's ever going to be a cultural touchstone like we saw with Minecraft, World of Warcraft, even Fortnite to a lesser extent. But I think that's where we are right now. And I guess we'll see where technology breakthroughs take us. I don't think games are getting worse.